where mental health meets real life. I'm your host, Samantha Ariza, therapist, educator, semi normal human being. It really depends on who you're asking. But I want to be your go to person for real, relatable conversations about healing, about growth, and this emotional wellness space. Around here, we believe that mental health doesn't have to be stiff or scary. We keep it human, practical, and have a little bit of fun along the way. We need it, right? Because life is messy and we're all just trying to figure it out. But again, I want to remind you that this is not therapy, not at all. Or even just like a therapy replacement. This is just a way to get some extra help along the way. Each week, you'll get honest insights, science backed tools, and stories that remind you you're not alone in this. Whether you're on your own healing journey or supporting someone else, there's something here for you. So grab a cup of coffee, a nice green tea, get cozied up, and let's dive in. So, have you ever noticed that things used to kind of roll off your back, but now they feel so much heavier? A minor inconvenience totally irritates you and gets on like the last nerve that you have, like the grating last nerve. A small request feels super overwhelming, and a normal conversation just feels so draining. And you might think, what's wrong with me? I used to handle more. But today we're going to get into it and what that really means because today we are talking about micro stressors, the small, repeated stress inputs that quietly accumulate, and how these things can really shrink your stress tolerance over time. And I feel like this is a big one. We've talked about a lot of like burnout and capacity and allostatic load, but this is a crucial one, a crucial topic that we need to get into because this is kind of where capacity kind of gets overrun and we don't realize it. Because sometimes it's not the big things. Sometimes it's not a big trauma or a big event. Sometimes it's just the hundreds of tiny little things, the tiny little demands on your nervous system that you've been absorbing without being able to recover from them. So, here are the sections we are going to cover today. The first one is what are microstressors? And the next one is why your stress tolerance shrinks because of them. The third section is microstressors are often invisible and things we don't realize. As well as number 4, the emotional impact of microstressors. Number 5, why people think that they're less resilient. And of course, my favorite part is practical tools that you can use to be able to overcome this like setback that you're dealing with and ways that we can really handle and improve our own mental health. So what are microstressors? Microstressors are those low level, often repetitive stressors, things that kind of happen all the time that we may not realize. Individually, they seem very manageable, but over time, when they collect, they increase that emotional load, they increase that body activation that we feel, and then they become unmanageable. Examples can include constant notifications, whether on your phone, your computer, tablets, all of these like blings that come up all the time. It could be rushing between tasks as well, where you're going from one thing to another and you're like fast paced. This one I feel in the morning when I'm trying to get the kids to school, this rushing that happens. It could also be decision fatigue and the idea of having to make so many decisions that by the end of the day, you're so tired out of making decisions. This could even be minor conflicts. These little things where you butt heads with someone, or even where you butt heads with yourself, just adding up. There could be people pleasing moments where you kind of put yourself in the second position in order to make someone else happy. There's suppression, which is a big thing we've been talking about. Background worry, which is another thing. Multitasking, which we all do. I know we do. But how that actually is putting extra stress on our system and we don't realize it. There can be lack of transition time, meaning we don't set enough time between getting from one place to another, like when we're trying to get to work or we're trying to get to another activity. And this can even be small interruptions, these things that kind of break up your flow in the middle of doing a task. And none of these things are really like big, catastrophic, like huge events. But research on daily stressors show that frequent minor stressors can predict mood disturbances and our physiological strain just as strongly, sometimes even more strongly than major life events. In other words, it's not always the big event. It's not the earthquake. It's not the world ending thing that happens. Sometimes it's the small things over time, that erosion that really changes the landscape for us. Early research on daily hassles found that small, repeated stressors were more strongly associated with psychological distress than major events. Why is that though? And it's because they're chronic. Again, when we talk about chronic, we're talking about something that keeps going. It's something that's almost feels never ending. And you know that chronic activation really matters. From a biological perspective, this connects directly to allostatic load. That wear and tear that just adds up on our body from that repeated activation of our stress systems, which we've talked about in earlier episodes. And when micro stressors happen repeatedly, like we've learned, the HPA axis activates. We know cortisol is released, and that nervous system, that sympathetic nervous system tone increases, as well as inflammatory markers can rise over time. So, even if each activation is small, that lack of recovery between those activations becomes the issue. Just like we learned in those earlier episodes. It's like adding, 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 and we never get the break to come back down, which means stress tolerance can shrink. Stress tolerance is not a personality trait, it's not something we have that stays static over time, it's a capacity state. And when the nervous system is repeatedly activated without adequate restoration, several things can happen. The first thing is that the baseline arousal rises. Again, with allostatic load and that stress system, we're going to change that baseline if we continue working at this high level. And that means that that system stays on, which means our recovery is going to slow and it's going to take longer to get back down. Our reactivity increases, meaning that smaller triggers are going to produce those bigger responses. And our cognitive flexibility decreases, meaning we're not going to have that same capacity to be able to think straight or figure out problems or do the things that we need to do. So we become more rigid and less adaptable. And of course, this is supported by research. Research shows that chronic stress alters that prefrontal cortex functioning, and it increases, you know, the other one, the amygdala. When our prefrontal is not working, our amygdala is going to be on overdrive. So if we are chronically stressed, we're not going to be thinking straight because that logic part is not accessed. We're going to just be dealing with that survival brain more. So that means when you're under cumulative stress, your brain becomes more threat sensitive and less flexible. So when you start thinking, I'm overreacting, it may not be about willpower. It might be about how much you are carrying and being about overcapacity. Because micro stressors are often invisible. And one of the most frustrating parts about it is that they don't feel legitimate. Like they don't feel like they need to be stressors. And because, you know, like that's the whole thing. We can't point to one big thing. It's all of these little things. So your nervous system doesn't always categorize stress as being big enough to count, big enough to matter. It just feels like these little things. But it responds to that frequency, that unpredictability, that lack of control, that lack of recovery. And research shows that that unpredictability and lack of control amplifies that stress response. So a day filled with a lot of minor interruptions, a lot of shifting expectations, a lot of maybe unresolved emails or subtle social tensions or, even these small things where you feel like you just didn't accomplish it. Like me, it's always the constant like mess that's in my house and never feels accomplished. I never feel like I get it done. These things keep your system in sustained activation. And I think that's a big thing. If we're talking about micro stressors, I have a friend on Instagram. Her name is Minding Your Mess, is Zaida. She is a social worker, and she's a social worker who deals in organization, which I think is a great thing because we're talking about micro stressors and mess and clutter and all of these things actually keep your nervous system activated. It's those subtle things that build up over time. And I know for me, like stress comes from that clutter. When I'm trying to walk and I'm tripping over a toy that's left in the middle of the room, or if I'm trying to get something and I can't find it, it's these micro stressors that build up over time and keep our system in that fight or flight mode. But there's another one. And you're probably going to get on me because you're going to be like, Sam, you've talked about this like how many times in this season? I'm talking about suppression and emotional suppression again, because this is another category of micro stressors that often goes unnoticed because it's internal. And again, every time you swallow that irritation or smile when you're frustrated or hold back those tears or avoid saying what you mean or monitor your tone and minimize your reaction, your nervous system is absorbing that stress. It's it's building that more capacity of withholding. And again, research on emotional suppression shows that inhibiting emotional expression doesn't reduce that stress, it increases. And again, it increases that activation and that cognitive load. In other words, you may look calm, but your body is still working. And that work costs that energy. Now imagine doing that in meetings and families and friendships and caregiving situations and customer interactions and social settings. And that's not one big stressor. Keeping yourself under control in all of these situations, that's just dozen of tiny physiological taxes. You're paying the stress tax in every one of these interactions. And even though suppression is often adaptive, meaning we're using this as a way to survive and a way to continue going, this repeated suppression, again, without expression, becomes part of that cumulative load. It's draining, it's pulling on, and it's adding extra wear and tear in your body and your emotions. So every time you don't say what you mean, your system is paying a small stress tax, and that adds up. But it's not only about the suppression. There's other things that are invisible to us that we don't necessarily pay attention to that are also playing a part in this huge idea of micro stressor. It's that digital noise. And it's a big modern micro stressor. We call it digital fragmentation, or as I'm going to continue to call it, digital noise. And this looks like notifications. I don't know. I had to stop recording for a second and I cut it out, or my editor cut it out, but I have to put my phone on like do not disturb because as I'm sitting, there's so many like pop-ups coming up. I get a million emails that I usually tend to ignore. I could show you. I have like, I don't know, like 30,000 emails unread that are on my phone or even text messages. I've gotten better at like reading all my text messages, but sometimes they'll just be rolling in. And I mean, if you work in a big company, you might have something like Slack or Microsoft Outlook. Just even scrolling, you're scrolling through and there's things popping up constantly, which means you kind of have this constant partial attention. You're doing something, but your mind is still kind of fragmented in the fact that it's listening to what's coming up on your phone. And research shows that frequent interruptions and task switching increases stress markers. It also impairs your working memory and it elevates that cognitive strain. So every notification on your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, especially if you have Apple, everything syncs and everything starts going off all at once. It's a microactivation. Your system is getting pinged with a little stress marker. And that's even if you don't respond. Your brain is going to shift its attention to that. And your nervous system is going to prepare for whatever is coming from that notification. And then you have to return to your task. So I know sometimes like when I'm trying to like I multitask all the time because I'm a mom and I'm a business owner and I'm trying to do all these things. I'll have to like start cooking and then pay attention to my daughter who's going to text me. And I've burned a couple meals because my I forget to switch back. And then it keeps happening. And it happens over and over again where we're distracted. And this keeps your system in that low level activation without that recovery. And we need recovery. And that's the other thing is I know for us, a lot of times we think scrolling is a restful thing for us. But scrolling is not always rest. Because if your brain is comparing yourself to whatever you're looking at or reacting or processing or evaluating because not every like we're scrolling and we're like ha 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 sometimes but sometimes things pop up and say they get us to think really deeply. This is our brain still working. So digital life doesn't just fill time, it fragments that recovery because our brain is not necessarily shutting off. And so digital recovery actually shrinks that stress tolerance and makes us more reactive. Do you feel like your worry and anxiety is kind of out of control? That any little thing can kind of send you out into a spiral and that you're constantly like stuck in your head without like any escape? I have a solution for you. Every month, I host a 30-minute free workshop that goes over tools and interventions and skills that we can learn to master your worry. That's kind of why I call it the Master Your Worry Workshop. So, what you can do is use the link in the description, go on arizainspire.com, and sign up. When you input your email and your name, you'll get a link to our Zoom workshop. And yes, I know it's Zoom, but you don't have to have your camera on. You can just be there to listen because each month there will be a new tool, a new skill, a new intervention, and I give you a workbook that'll help you work through that. It's exclusive to those who are attending the workshop. So if this is something you think can help you, sign up. It's something that we do for free for anybody who needs that extra help and support. So I hope to see you in our next workshop. So, what is the impact of these micro stressors? Because micro stressors don't just affect that physiology, they don't just keep us in this stressed, activated state. They impact our mood stability, our patience, our empathy, our frustration tolerance, our motivation. And studies on daily stress show that repeated small stressors can predict increased negative effect, meaning we feel not so great about things. It lowers that positive affect, meaning we don't necessarily feel happy as often. It can disturb our sleep and it gives us conflict with the people around us. And this is a big thing. I feel like all the moms can relate when it comes to this because when we're trying to get so much done and our attention is distracted, we tend to be snippier. We tend to be very dissatisfied with what's going on with us. And the key part here is when positive emotional experiences are reduced, while these micro stressors remain very high, our resilience shrinks. And resilience is just our bounce back. And because we're constantly stressed, we don't feel like we can bounce back. You don't just get more stressed, you get less buffer and you get less bounce back than what you had before, which is why people think that they are less resilient now. When stress tolerance shrinks, people often assume I'm weaker than I used to be. I can't handle what others handle. I've changed. But what often changed wasn't personality. It was that cumulative load, the ability of what you were able to handle. Like I said, I feel like moms can relate because our attentions are always shifted and we're always trying to do more and we get snappier with our kids and we're trying to do all the things. And it's just we end up past our capacity. So let me give you a visual of what I'm talking about. Let's picture this bowl right here. This bowl right here is you. And I know it's a little sparkly inside, but we all glitter in the inside, right? But let's picture that this bowl is you, and this is your capacity for the day. We want to fit as much stuff usually into our bowls as possible. And we want to fit good stuff, right? So I'm going to use this as the good stuff that we have. Yes, it's from Christmas, but it works because they're all sparkly. But you can even see on the inside, everything is a different size, meaning there are different tasks, different things we do, different amounts of uh, energy we have to put towards these different things. But they're all good. They're all things we want to put in there. But we have our micro stressors. Now, let's say we want to spend time having our coffee in the morning, right? Coffee is a good thing. But as we're trying to have our coffee, we're running around, making lunches, getting the kids up, preparing breakfasts for the kids. And so we've already like stressed ourselves out because we're doing all that. And there's our coffee, right? But then we have to rush the kids to school and we have to make sure we get on time and the bus might be running late. And so we're continuing to go. And then we want to, as we get home, take some time for ourselves. Oof, there's not much room left in there. Because then we have all the other things, the notifications, the work, all of the things that we need to do, cleaning the house. Oh, there's not much left. And if I continue with all of the micro stressors and then I try to put the things that I want in there, as you can see, just trying to put the things that I want to do in here is causing an overflow. And it's not because they're huge things. It's because I'm already filled up with all these micro stressors. And that's the thing. We never really realize that these micro stressors are overflowing us. That when we try to do the things that we want to do, we're already past capacity. Because micro stressors are like that sand, and that sand fills up that space very quietly and quickly because we're not paying attention. And the problem isn't always those big things. Those big things could be things that, even if they are stressful, are beneficial to us. Like, let's say it's about going to the gym or creating a big project that we need for work. The problem isn't always the rock and what it is, it's the sand that's been accumulating there that whole day. So, here's some key insights. Your nervous system doesn't measure stress by dramatic impact. Again, it measures it by that cumulative load. So when you feel like you're overreacting to something small, it's not about that small moment. Like all of those things of sand or salts are not that big. It's just that we have filled up already and we don't have enough room for the things that matter. It's not about how big the thing is, it's about how much capacity you have to give. Because micro stressors don't stay contained, they spill into everything, especially into our relationships. And this is a big thing for us. Because remember, I said if we are filling up in this cumulative load and feeling like our capacity is lower and our stress tolerance is lower, we are going to feel snappy and snippy with the people around us. Research on daily stress shows that small stress accumulations increase that irritability, reduce that patience, and lower our empathy, which is huge if you're talking about relationships and interpersonal relationships. And that's why arguments sometimes happen over nothing. It's rarely about that dish in the sink. It's rarely about really the tone that somebody uses. It's rarely about, the shoes in the middle of the living room. It's about those notifications, the rush transitions, the swallowed frustrations, that incomplete recovery, and that mental load. All of the things that are begging for our attention that we feel like we have to do, that we ignore what's right in front of us and more important. Because when your nervous system is already elevated, your window of tolerance is going to narrow, which means your tone is going to feel sharper. Those requests, whether it's a request to go get a paper towel or maybe like get a drink from the refrigerator, those requests are going to feel so much heavier. And your patience is going to be so much thinner. You're not going to have any of that patience at all. And you're not becoming a worse partner or a parent or a friend. You're just becoming a more activated nervous system. You're just on edge. And activation without that necessary recovery changes those relational behaviors because it's not a character flaw again. This is not saying that you are a bad person. This is just your physiology doing what it needs to do. But here is my favorite section of every episode. And I think considering all of the stressors we talked about and how stress is super important to kind of start managing, we really are going to have to zone in on this and zoom in on what we need to do for this. And I'm talking to myself here because I know right now on my Instagram, we're talking about sleep, and it's looking like my sleep is a behavioral issue and not anything about biology and anything that I need to fix internally. It sounds like it's a behavioral thing, and it's probably because of stress. It sounds like my stress is out of control. So, in these tips, I'm going to be talking to myself as much as I'm going to be talking to you because I need to manage those micro stressors because I'm a mom, a business owner, all of this. So, I think they're adding up on my end too. So, what is the first thing we can do? We can track our micro stressors for 1 week. And this is important because we can't deal with a problem that we are clueless about because most people only notice those big stress things. So for this 1 week of our tracking, we're going to write down and pay attention to those small daily stress inputs, those interruptions, those minor conflicts where we feel that decision fatigue, that self suppression, all of the rushing. Because even this, I feel like for myself, I'm like, I need to probably wake up earlier in the morning. So I am not rushing and I can take my time with getting the kids ready and doing the things that I need to do or doing it like the night before because we're not judging them here. We're just noticing them. We're identifying it so that we can do something about it because awareness alone reduces that unconscious load. We need to bring awareness to the things in order to better ourselves. We can't remove them if we don't know what they are. Which leads us to the second point, which is reduce the unnecessary 10%. Because we can't eliminate all of the stressors. And we may not eliminate all of the big stressors, but we can reduce some of them. Maybe we start by reducing the unnecessary notifications. I know for me at night right now, my phone goes into like sleep mode, which means you can't contact me after like 8 o'clock. But maybe there's other things we can do. Maybe we turn off notifications on a lot of the apps on our phone. I think I need to do that with a few of them myself. We also can reduce overcommitment. How much no are we saying versus yeses? Because those are other stressors when we're starting to lose out on that time, right? We get rid of the excessive multitasking where we just focus on one thing at a time. We get rid of avoidable friction, the things that are getting in our way that we can like outsource for the most part. I have a cleaning lady who comes every other week, and every other week, my life seems to lower a bit. Like my stress levels come down, and it helps. It's friction that I need to be reduced. And we can get rid of emotional overfunctioning, meaning we're not sitting there attending to everybody around us. We're not people pleasing. We're not suppressing our emotions. And that's the thing. All of these things may seem like small things that we're doing, but they add up all of those small little grains of sand we can take away so we have room for the bigger things. The third thing we're going to do is now that we've created some space, we are going to build micro recovery moments because recovery doesn't require hours. We talked about this with allostatic load. Our bodies just need to know there's a time where we can slow down. So we don't have to have hours or days or weeks of a break. Research on stress recovery shows that short restorative periods help regulate our physiological activation. For example, taking 2 minutes of slow breathing in between tasks, maybe stepping outside for 5 minutes. Another thing we could do is take the screens away for a few minutes, put the screens away and do something else. The big one that I think I'm noticing we need to start bringing back from like childhood is transition rituals between tasks. If I'm going to stop working, do I have a habit I can go to that kind of decompresses me after work before I go into something else? I say this like with clients with their commute home. Is there something that they can do to kind of transition? Use that 30-minute commute to kind of let out the stress from work and be ready to just be home when they get home. And then we can even add some body movements, whether you're doing yoga or stretching or any of that. These are things that can help our body take the rest that they need. We need to start thinking in cycles: activation, recovery, activation, recovery. Whenever we are activated, we make sure the next thing is to recover. Next, for number 4, we have to protect our cognitive bandwidth. This is our cognitive capacity. So, when we're talking about decision fatigue or task switching, those things we need to find out not to do because those two things in itself increase that stress load. So, here are some strategies we can use. We can batch similar tasks. For example, for me, maybe I have a day of just filming. All I am doing is filming that day, which means that another day I'm setting aside to write scripts or to plan out content. We batch those similar tasks because then we're only focusing on doing one thing. We're not switching between script writing, filming, because that's just too much for our systems. We also reduce trivial decisions. On Fridays, we have fast food Friday. The kids have pizza for lunch at school. That means on Friday, I have already reduced 2 meals that I have to worry about doing. Where can I take away a little bit of decision and just create a new habit or routine that takes away from that decision fatigue? Which means we create those predictable routines. What are other routines like nighttime routines and getting ready for bed or even like routines in the morning? Routines take away that decision making that we have to do and brings that predictability that our body craves. Our bodies love to know what we're going to do next, meaning it's familiar, meaning we're not stressed out. And that means we can also schedule those deep work blocks, when I'm going to sit there and be really focused on work or I'm going to sit and focus on my house. When we have these things kind of boxed and compartmentalized, that reduces that mental fragmentation and lowers our baseline arousal. And number 5, we're going to add micro positive experiences. Positive emotion broadens that cognitive flexibility. It's kind of that zoom out that we need. We sometimes zoom in so much on the negative. We need to zoom out, and that broadens what we're looking at and broadens how we feel about things. So, small boosts really matter. This can be humor, sunlight, music, even like a quick phone call or text. It can be gratitude moments or even just like sensory things. I'm a little weird with texture, but I know people like love those like squishmallows or like slime. If those are the things that you like, just taking a time to mess with something that brings you joy is going to be super helpful. Because you don't necessarily need a huge life overhaul, you just need some counterbalance. You need some small things to build in to counterbalance those small negative things. Number 6 is to respect your shrinking tolerance as data. So when you notice, and again, notice, not judging, that you're irritable or impatient or overwhelmed or shut down instead of saying, "What is wrong with me?" Maybe you should ask instead, what has my system been carrying quietly? What have I been overloading myself with? Because that shift reduces that shame, and shame itself is, guess what? A stressor. So if small things have been feeling bigger for you lately, it doesn't mean that you're fragile. It just means that your stress cup, this capacity cup of ours right here, has been filling up quite slowly with things that are not the most important things to us. So micro stressors matter. And resilience isn't about becoming unbothered. It's about managing that load, restoring that capacity, and respecting those thresholds of doing too much and recovering when we need to. So this week, try one thing. Notice one small stressor and one small recovery, and start building those in more consistently. Because rebuilding tolerance doesn't start with toughness, it starts with awareness and regulation. But that's it for me today, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you found something helpful, inspiring, or just validating, I'd love if you'd hit that follow button and follow the show. If you want, leave a review and tell people what really kind of resonated with you, share a comment, or even just share this episode with someone who might need it. Do you want more tools? Because I have some more things that could be helpful on your mental wellness journey. And they're on arizainspire.com. You'll find a lot of other resources there. There are a lot of things that can help you with feelings, with accessing therapy, with getting to know how to deal in emotional crisis moments. And these things are here to help you heal, grow, and show up for yourself. But don't forget that if you're not following here on the show, that you should follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Ariza Inspire. And that's where we keep these conversations going. I share a lot of mental health tips. Again, I'm trying to make mental health more accessible. Right now, we're talking about sleep and my sleep and how that is a huge thing, whether people realize of how you handle mental health. And of course, I'm going to post about new episodes as well as new offerings and workshops and courses. But at the end of the day, my friend, I hope you have a great one. And this is the end of season 3 for us. So until we meet again, take care of yourself, and I'll catch you next time.